This is episode number 5 out of 10. My name is Daria Parhomenko. I'm a licensed broker in Dubai and advising people on real estate. Episode 5 will be focused on service charges, on the rental, and on reputation of developer. So, service charges is amount of money that investor pays yearly, and it is amount which is multiply of the area and fixed service charges. Let's say I have a studio of 500 square feet and the service charges is 12 dirham. So my yearly service charges will be 500 square feet multiplied by 10, and I will have to pay it quarterly to developer to clear the service charges. Service charges can be starting from 4 dirham for villa and townhouse communities in residential area and going up to 55 plus dirham on the apartments on a prime location with ultra luxury exclusive services. So villa and townhouses in general 4 dirham per square foot of your build up area paid yearly. Some communities like H&H, they have a special facilities, amenities, and they project the service charges will be 8 dirham. And if we're talking about waterfront, their service charges go up because of the location. For apartments, in general, the lowest service charge that I can remember is 9 dirham per square foot, and it goes up. In general, in JVC, for example, Ellington gives 19 dirham per square foot. If we're talking about branded residence with abundance of facilities, amenities, where you have your valet parking, a lot of co-working space, and many facilities, it goes up to 25 dirham projected by developers. And if we talk about DIFC, special exclusive projects, or waterfront communities, there we're talking about 25 to 45, 55 dirham per square foot per year. Service charges, again, always paid by the owner of the property. From rental. Rental can be yearly, monthly, and daily rent. Yearly rent is something that requires from the tenant to have a residency. You need to have your visa, and in this case, you can rent apartment with a good price. As an investor, you can offer a rental to be paid in one check or maybe in 12 checks. If you give more checks, your rental become higher because you increase the risk by some checks maybe not be paid on time. So there is always a choice whether you want to have a safe rental or you would like to risk a little bit and give more flexibility to the tenant, increase the number of checks and have a higher rental. Second thing that impacts on the rental is a furnishing. Yes, some developers at the moment provide a furnished apartments. However, there is non-furnished projects also where you need to put the furniture. You can spend a little more, have apartment furnished, and then the person who rent from you does not have to go through all this hassle, but he is ready to pay a little bit more for the rental. Yearly rent is good in terms that all the connections for utility services is under the tenant. Tenant have to connect to a DIVA, which is water and electricity, to AC provider separately, and to gas provider. All the accounts are on the name of the tenant, and tenant is responsible. In this case, he's putting deposit behind each connection, and that is an extra cost because you need to freeze some money. That is why yearly rent is good, but when we come to monthly rent, that will be understood why people choose to have a monthly rent. So coming back to a yearly rental, the tenant needs to be informed in advance, at least 3 months before the end of the period, by official source of communication, which is email address, about yearly rental increase. In Dubai, all the yearly rental is under Dubai Land Department, and there is a rental index for each area, which says what is the current rental for studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, apartment, and so on. Based on this current situation on the market, you can change the current contract of the tenant and increase it based on this rental. However, from 2025, there is a chance to have a separate rental index for a standalone building or even for single unit. There is inspection that you can order, pay separate amount, and have a rental index on your particular unit. But aside from this, there is a rental index for the area based on which you can increase the rental. And very clear in Dubai, the law stipulates the amount on which the owner allowed to increase the rental. From 2013, there is no changes in this law. Let's say if all market goes 40% above the current contract that you have, the owner allowed to increase only by 20% the current rent, and so on. Moving on to the monthly rental. Monthly rental needs to include all the bills inside, and this is very popular for people who come into Dubai, let's say for a contract that they will have to stay 6 months until they have approval, or they don't know if they stay. In this case, they don't want to get inside of the yearly contract, but they are ready to pay a good property with the furniture, with all the bills included, and have no connections to this property to be able to move anytime. Yes, there is a risk on monthly rent that next month your tenant will opt to buy a property or opt to go for a yearly contract, or for any various reason change the location. But you also have a flexibility as an investor, because depends on the situation on the market. Monthly contract, you can increase the rent for the next month without any prior notification. Just at the end of the month you need to inform the person. Always there is a plus and minuses in each part of the rental. Security of the yearly rent, but then you are merged with your tenant for a longer period of time, because when a yearly contract is there, you cannot just evict your tenant. By law, tenant is always very well protected by the government. So if you would like to increase the rent, you can do it only on a legal basis by rental index. And if you are selling the apartment, you can give eviction notice, but you cannot just give eviction notice, evacuate the tenant and put another tenant, because if your first tenant will find out that you re-rented, you will have to compensate him yearly rental where he is currently resigning. You can only give eviction notice if you would like to move in by yourself or your direct relatives, or you just selling the apartment to somebody else. And all the yearly contract needs to be registered in a JARI system, and that's what we see as a reflection on Dubai Land Department page when we check what is the current rent in each area. Monthly contracts are not registered in this system, and that's why you can change the monthly rental based on your preference and for sure on the market demand. If we're talking about weekly or daily rent, that is something taken care by third-party companies, and yes, in this case it feels like you will have a better return on investment, but the company that do the management for this property takes around 20% of your revenue to cover their expenses on managing the property. And for sure, there is always, the higher your return, the higher the risk. For example, if something will happen to the property, there will be a legal case that will block the property from being rented. That's why a lot of investors choose a very safe way to give the property on a yearly rent, preferably with less number of checks, and reinvest this amount of money. So this is about rental. If we're talking about reputation of developer, the more awareness developer has across the market, the better is the rental, and it's easier to resell your property in the future. We're talking about master developers whose marketing budget allows them to go outside of UAE and promote their properties as far as, for example, if the investor in US knows the developer, it will be easy for him to buy your property on the secondary market, because people already have understanding what's the brand value, what's the quality, and what's the rental. However, when there is a small developers, they still just establish their reputation and might not reach that level of awareness, but they can locally be widely popular and also have a good rental index. And investor always asks who is gonna cover the service for taking care of the rental. Investor pays zero for his property being rented out, because the person who is renting the property pays 5% from a value of the contract to a brokerage company from whom he is taking this property. So in this case, investor has no expenses. The company that takes care of the investment do the listing, do all the viewings, and charge the tenant for these services. If there is a monthly rental, then again there is a fixed amount that the new tenant paying while taking property on a monthly rental. In a nutshell, this is all about service charges and rental returns and reputation of developer. On the episode number 6, I will talk more in details about off-plan projects and payment plans and speed of construction.